All right, so where our start is right here. 3 different kinds of muscle: cardiac, smooth, skeletal. This chapter is by far leaning more towards the study of skeletal muscle. We'll touch on a little bit of cardiac and smooth, but just a little, because you get more of that specifically in A&P 2. Right? Our job right now is more skeletal. So look at the orientation of the whole muscle itself. It's very similar to what we saw in the nervous system, in that what we saw is if I have about 5 or 6 markers in my hand here, right? It's a bundle of markers, you could say, right? If each marker represents a muscle fiber, then I have a bundle of muscle fibers, right? What we're going to call the muscle fiber is the muscle cell. So that's the first big thing you got to get into your brain. When I say muscle cell, I mean muscle fiber. And when I say muscle fiber, I'm talking about the muscle cell. What is every cell surrounded by? What's its barrier? Every cell. The cell membrane, the plasma membrane, right? So consider the plastic coating on this marker. It's cell membrane. But instead of saying a cell membrane, we call it a sarcolemma. So now every muscle fiber that I'm holding, every marker that I'm holding, has a sarcolemma, right? Because it's its own cell membrane. So when you think of muscle cells, you need to not be thinking about some nice round cell, right? This is more cylindrical. It's a tube, right, of a fiber. And inside of that cell is more fibers, smaller fibers that we'll see. More protein filaments is what we'll see. But for the moment, consider each marker to be a muscle fiber. When I've got a group of them, I call it a fascicle. And when I have several fascicles together, I call it the entire muscle. So in this picture on the board, the smallest thing sticking out says muscle fiber, right? It's one of about a dozen inside this one fascicle, and that one fascicle that's sticking out is one of about 7 or 8 making up the whole muscle. Can you see that? That's the big thing. There's a whole section of the test in matching where you're going to be asked, groups of muscle fibers are known as fascicles, right? Groups of fascicles are known as the entire muscle belly. Right. Or you could go the other way. The entire muscle belly is made up of fascicles. Each fascicle is made up of muscle fibers, right? Now, if we go inside each muscle fiber, we dive in, which you can't see on the picture, but we're going to do it mentally. If you dive into each muscle fiber is made up of myofibrils. So I've got a PowerPoint slide that explains all this, but I'm doing this first because it's one of the big things I need you to get. So each muscle fiber, if you had fibers, you can barely see them in this picture, but sticking out of that muscle fiber would be smaller protein fibers, which are called myofibrils. And then it goes even deeper than that. So that's where we're going in just a little bit. But let's do the layers that we can see on this picture here, because again, I've got another slide that explains all this, very detailed. What is that wrapping around the fascicle? Perimysium. What's that wrapping around the entire muscle? Epimysium. Right? So the epi is around the entire muscle, the peri is around the fascicle, just like we said for the nerves, right? We had perineurium around the fascicle of axons, remember that? And endoneurium around each axon, right? So now around each muscle fiber is going to be an endomysium that we're going to see. So that will be coming up. But because we only have one class period to cover this, I usually like to mention it twice. So I'm mentioning it now, and we're going to pretend in 20 minutes, when I mention it again, you're going to say to yourself, oh yeah, I heard that before. So it's like we're living 2 days in one. Because typically I always cover this in 2 days, not one. All right, here's some of the general stuff that we have to know about muscles. General functions here: produce movement, maintain posture, stabilize joints. We've all been through that. Thermogenesis is nothing more than it produces heat. The muscles counting as a motor in the body, they produce motion. Anything that produces energy always lets off heat, right? So when we use our muscles, we give off heat. Other considerations would be, which is not in the textbook, surprisingly, or not surprisingly, is that muscle mass, skeletal muscle mass, is one of the prime indicators of absolute whole body health, meaning your immune system. If you have no muscle mass, your immune system is basically shot, for the most part, right? Those people that get older and lose all their muscle mass, their immune system drops dramatically. So immune function, right, is very much helpful with immune function. And also glucose management. Those people who have no muscle mass do not manage sugar properly. Right? Okay, so I can go off of that for like hours. Main properties here. Excitability just means any muscle can be excited. It's responsive to stimuli. Contractility means when it gets excited, what's it going to do? Contract. Perfect. Extensibility means it has the property that can be stretched. So muscle fibers can be stretched. The next part is when they're stretched, they have the ability to do what? Return to their original tone, and that's the elasticity. So know the difference. Extensibility is stretching. Elasticity is returning from the stretch. What happens for people that have postural distortions, which they call elastic and plastic deformations, is that let's say you sleep on one side and you sleep on 3 pillows, so your neck is like this all night long, right, as you're laying on that high pillow. Or you fall asleep on your head like this on the couch and your neck is the same way. That will stretch out these muscles on one side, right? If you do that enough through months and years, you will clearly mess up that muscle where all it does to return to shape is a spasm. So that's how postural things can start off, simple deviations, but they turn into big muscle problems and spasms because they lose their sense of elasticity. And that's all over the place. All right, basic properties of these 3 muscles. For a smooth muscle, we consider it to be non-striated, involuntary. This is old news, I think. We've done this before. So which one of these on the picture is smooth muscle? On the far right. Yeah. Okay, good. Slow and sustained contractions. Once smooth muscle gets going, it's pretty powerful, but it's not a very fast contracting muscle. It is in the sense of the tone of the blood vessels. It can contract fairly fast because the surface area is small. But you don't want your smooth muscle in your colon contracting very fast, do you? No, we want it to be very slow and controlled, yes. I think we can all appreciate that. I swear I'm still 14. I can never give that up. Another name for a muscle cell, we've got lots of names. We can call it a muscle fiber, we can call it a myocyte or a myofiber. All the same thing. Myocyte, myofiber, muscle fiber, or muscle cell. All the same thing no matter what kind of muscle you're talking about. Next up, cardiac. Striated in appearance. It has the striations just like skeletal does. Still involuntary. Found only in the heart. And it's more branched. So cardiac muscle has lots of branching to it because they're all networked together. And what do we call these network links right here? These rigid lines, the zigzag lines that branch each muscle fiber to the next. Those are the intercalated discs right here. Intercalated disc. Those are those connections. So the cell junctions that we see are gap junctions and desmosomes. So what do you take when you take a gap junction and a desmosome and put it together? An intercalated disc. That's what that is. So the answer here is gap junctions and desmosomes. If you look back in, was that chapter 4? We talked about, chapter 3, we talked about cell junctions. So the heart has a special disc, an intercalated disc, that enables each muscle fiber to connect with the other one electrically so that all the fibers together can act on the same impulse very, very, very fast. And they can share the same impulse. That's how the heart acts as a unit, right? You don't want one part of the heart doing a whole different thing, you know. It should all contract as a unit. Okay, lastly, skeletal muscle is definitely striated, voluntary control.